Andy Johnson. This is a recording of a webinar from March 27th, looking at comprehension and comprehension skills for students in grades 4 and above. Tonight, the topics are some tips for helping all students, grade 4 through graduate school, read and comprehend better, and some pre-reading things that teachers and parents can do. And then finally, study skill strategies, what they are and how to teach them. But first of all, as always, the most important thing when dealing with children, and you know this, is the emotional element, especially with struggling readers. We know that positive emotions enhance learning, negative emotions detract from learning. So attending to the emotional element of the learner is a research-based strategy. And when working with students, especially struggling readers, that relationship that you have is really the most important thing. No real teaching and learning occurs until you establish some sort of relationship with the student. And they have to trust you. That means they trust that you're not going to embarrass, humiliate, and frustrate the learner. And finally, confidence. Most of what I deal with struggling readers is help them develop their confidence that they can do it and to enable them to see themselves as readers, as literate people. This is the basis of much of my work in dealing with struggling readers. But first, just a general tip, if your child is struggling with word identification, just a simple thing, turn on the caption function when watching TV or playing video games. The more words you can get going across your child's eyeballs, the better. This is a very simple thing. Turn off the sound if you need to and only include the captions, or maybe include both, but try that, it works. So where are the geniuses? A little story. When I began my PhD work back in 1992, I went to the University of Minnesota, and I was afraid that people would discover how very ordinary I was. I thought there would be geniuses at such a research institution. But what I found out over time is there were no geniuses. Well, maybe there are one or two. But most of the professors, the researchers, the scholars, knew how to use the way their brain functioned to become readers and writers and scholars and researchers. They learned some very specific strategies that I'm going to show you some of these tonight. Now, the first part of this is how to improve your studying and reading comprehension. Now, this particularly is for students in grades 4 and above, and including college-age students. So let's take a look. You cannot read a textbook the same way as you read a Harry Potter book, all right? Now, don't think students know that, even at the undergraduate level. I have to remind my students and tell them, you cannot read the textbook the same. The purpose is different. You read a story to read and enjoy. You read a textbook to read and understand. So you must approach them differently. And you cannot assume at any level that students know and understand that. Something else, music does not improve your ability to comprehend. Now, it may relax you initially so that you can settle down. It may block out some background noise, but the brain encodes information best if there is no excess input. So just something to think about. And the third idea, ear guards. Now, these can be used in a classroom. These can be used at home, in a library. It blocks out that excess stimulus. Now, in a classroom, you may want to have some ear guards, and they're relatively inexpensive, and you would spray on them, of course, to disinfect them after use. If you don't want to be as obtrusive, you have these smaller earplug types of things, and I used that a lot when I began studying and learning how to read research articles. It blocks out the extra noise. Very helpful. A study tip: if you really want to read and understand, if you want to learn more and study less, study little bits over time instead of massed. This idea that you can cram the night before the exam, or maybe the anxiety helps you focus, but you learn less and you remember less over time. Massed versus distributed practice, whether they do experiments on rats or human beings, little bits over time, you'll learn more and study less. So if you studied a half hour a day versus cram it into 1 4-hour session, no. So start your reading early. And when you have spaces between your reading, it allows the unconscious mind to kick in, to process, to synthesize, to make connections. When your logical frontal lobes aren't dealing with it, that allows those connections to be made with the rest of the mind. So little bits of study over time is much more effective than one big mass study. Here's probably one of the best strategies of all times. It's the 3x5 card. Remember, I was tutoring a high school kid, and she had failed the reading part of her exam. And they asked me, what can you do? And I was tutoring this student, and what I gave her is just a 3x5 card to keep track of her reading. And she put it underneath her reading, and it helped her eyes stay focused. And then after each page, I would simply ask, tell me one main idea. But the simple 3x5 card is very helpful, and I use this a lot, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but especially for complex reading. Take little breaks, and this is stuff that you already know, but sometimes you have to hear it again. Pause and process time. It allows, again, your unconscious mind to make these connections. So even when you're not thinking about it, you are thinking about it. Even if it's a little 2-minute break, but every hour or so, give yourself a break to refresh the mind, reset the mind, and allow it to reset and synthesize information. Take notes in some form as you're reading, and we'll talk more about that. But it keeps you physically engaged as you're reading, so you're processing at deeper levels. And you must identify the salient elements as you're reading and recording these ideas. All right, so you must take notes in some form or fashion as you are studying, as you are reading a textbook. Nobody can take a complex research article, or very few, and read it through and get all the information. Most people need to use some form of note-taking strategy. Now here's one that I use. I call it a simple dot in the margin. That I don't want to interrupt the flow as I'm reading and take notes, but I just put a simple dot in the margin so I can go back then when it's time for me to highlight or to take notes to find those salient points. As well, I love buying used books that have notes and comments in the margin. It becomes kind of a three-way conversation then. I get to see what other people thought of it and what other people found interesting. As well, in my own books and journal articles, when I'm reading them, I too like to make comments in the margin. Again, I can go back and see what I was thinking, the connections I made. So if you're reading, if you're in high school and they don't like that sort of thing, a pencil dot in the margin will be just fine. It enables you then to go back as you take notes to find out what was important. Why are notes so important? Paper is one of the best things ever invented for studying and learning. It becomes a visual representation of short-term memory. Short-term memory has a limited capacity, 7 plus or minus bits of things at a time. It can hold it for about 15 seconds. So you can't hold a lot. But on the paper you see everything and you can make the connections, and it does not tax the capacity of short-term memory. So that's why paper is so important. And the last kind of study tip, if you're studying for an exam, if you're training for an exam, and this is probably something you know, but you want to review your notes and find a study buddy or a group. It allows you, it invites you to explain the ideas. Go through your notes. This is what I thought, and they explain the ideas. You see what they found. It invites you to describe what you think is important, either in small groups or with a partner. Now, if you're a high school teacher, a middle school teacher, you want to help your students with this. Put them in groups for a study session before the exam to review their notes. If you're a parent at home, go through, ask your child to explain the things before an exam. It's that verbalizing, that describing, that invites you to think about it, to process at deeper levels. Now, how to get assignments done better with less effort? Again, start your assignments early. Start your writing projects early. It gets your unconscious mind involved. So you're thinking about it even when you're not thinking about it, instead of waiting till the last second. Now, here's a little trick I use. I say if I don't want to do something, I say I'm going to just do a real rotten job. Just get something on paper, just slop. All right, that begins the process. So start assignments early, even if it's just something very simple, not very complex. Just get something on the paper. Start early. And again, little bits over time is much better than trying to write the thing the night before. A note to teachers and parents about homework. A little homework is good, but that doesn't mean a whole bunch of homework is better. The purpose of homework is to practice learning, to practice what was learned in class. That is the purpose, not to challenge the student. So, 2 tips: allow for time in class for homework. You can circulate, you can see how the students are processing things, and you can't control what happens outside the classroom. So allowing a good chunk of time in class for homework, remembering the purpose is to practice what they have learned in class. The success rate for homework should be about 90 to 100%. That's what you're aiming for in a homework assignment. So you want to make sure that assignments are within the zone of proximal development, just a little above their independent level where they can do it with a little help from the teacher. Don't want to frustrate your students. So some pre-reading strategies, things that parents and teachers can do to help their child or their student read expository text, which is information text. Very rarely should students be asked to cold read expository text, and that's the word I'll use for informational text. All right. They need some sort of preparation. Knowing that in a classroom, if you're a teacher, some students are going to be 2 or more grade levels above, some 2 or more grade levels below. So you have to create some sort of scaffold or strategy. A couple of ideas. A very simple one is to pre-teach some or most of the content. So as a reader, you're filling in the blanks. The text then becomes kind of a buddy to help you teach. You can expand upon the text. You're not teaching from the text or to the text, but it is a partner. So before you ask them to read, you teach some or most of the content. Now, if you're a parent at home, if you know some of the content that your child is reading about, if you can talk through and describe to them what you know about some or most of the content. Simple ideas. An advanced organizer is anything that organizes the content in advance of the lesson or the reading. They can see the basic structure of what is to be read in advance of the reading. And this can be posted on the board so all students can see it, or on a sheet of paper. And you can see the topic and individual elements. They come in a variety of forms. They show the structure and the content. So at a glance, it provides the scaffold to enable students to easily assimilate what they're reading, what they're hearing. They come in a variety of forms. A semantic map, again, shows the relationship of one thing to another. A concept maps has a hierarchical, or creates a hierarchical structure of things. It really doesn't matter the term that you use. The important thing is that you're showing the content of what is to be read ahead of time, to create a scaffold, to make reading and understanding easy. And of course, one of the easiest ones is a simple outline on the board. It could be on the board, or it could be on a piece of paper, or it could be verbally. This chapter is about 3 important things you'll be reading. And again, this can be done as a teacher or a parent. As a parent, that means you're going to have to do a little work up front to reread and find the structure of the text. But a simple outline is one of the best advanced organizers. They can see the structure of what is to be read ahead of time. Which gets to guided notes, which are basic notes with some or most of the content included. The students can fill in as they're reading. Now, in a classroom, a multi-level classroom, and all classrooms are multi-level. If you have a struggling learner, you can just very quietly say, well, who would like an outline today? Or you can give the guided notes to a student. And some students will have more on their guided notes. Some will have less on their guided notes. Guided notes. Here's kind of a game format that works. Brainstorm and Confirm. This enables you to activate relevant schemata. That's a fancy way of saying get all the knowledge in your head up into the forefront so you can use that to make sense of what you're reading. Now, I love when students talk with each other. That's important. They could brainstorm in large group, small group, with a pair, or individually if they need. So before reading, they brainstorm and list exactly what they know about the topic they're going to be reading. During reading, they simply put a little check or a dot in the margin every time they encounter that brainstormed idea. And if you want to make a game format, of course, in small groups, 3 to 5 minutes to brainstorm, check in the margin. All right. Group with the most checks is the winner. This would be grades probably 5 and above. And it gets the student, it invites the students to read that chapter, that article with purposeful intent. I'm reading to find out instead of just reading. Here's another strategy to use in a classroom. You might want to do this at home with a child. Double look back. After every page or paragraph, you decide one or both of them identify an interesting or important idea before continuing. It's the conversation that takes place again as they identify this was an important idea or this was an interesting idea. That's one thing. So after every page or every paragraph or every section, you decide. They look back. This was one interesting or important idea, the conversation. A similar idea, reciprocal reading, the same as double look back, except after every page or paragraph, one person covers and describes what was read and the other one is a checker. And then you read the next page or paragraph and the roles are reversed. Now, what you don't want to do is pair a strong reader with a weak reader, right? That puts the stronger reader in the not comfortable position of always having to be a tutor, and that's not their role. So I recommend random selection, or however you do it, but you do not always want to pair that strong reader with a weaker reader. Okay, some study skill strategies, and these are found in my book if you want some more particulars. And adopt and adapt these strategies, these specific skills, study skill strategies. And in every grade level, starting in grade 3, maybe 4 and above, you want to teach 2 or 3 of these and teach them very specifically. They have steps. Put them on a poster on the board and remind students before reading, remember, you have to use one of these strategies to help you. At home with your student, remember you're going to read this chapter. Which strategy are you going to use here? Never assume at any level that students know or remember how to read. So here are some study skill strategies. And here's the thing about a poster. When I was a wrestling coach, I used something similar. I had the various moves and I had them in posters with the steps right there. And wrestlers would go back and refer to them during practice. Again, never assume that your readers know the steps for this. First one is taking notes, and this is a very simple strategy. Adopt and adapt what you do. Record the heading, read the paragraph, read and record an important idea, and move on. Have them use numbers and letters. You don't need to use official outline form. That is very important. Don't get caught up in the official outline form, whatever that is. Well, that seems rather commonplace, you say. Everyone should know that. No, everyone doesn't know that. You need to teach them. This is a very simple, and I know they have complex note-taking forms, and a lot of these official things that are research-based, and I'm thinking of the Kansas strategy, no offense, but most of them are too cumbersome to be used. If you want your students to use it, it has to be quick, it has to be efficient, and it has to actually help. So take notes. Dot and notes, you've kind of seen this. Read the paragraph, put a dot next to the important ideas, finish the chapter. Then you go back and you take notes and you create outlines with headings and subheadings. Preview, overview. Look at the title and headings. Read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. You're creating the structure you see. Then read the article and take notes. That take notes part is important. Skim, reread a note. Quickly skim read the article. Then reread the chapter and note or record important ideas. This gives you a sense of what it's about first, and then you have to read. Paragraph reread. And again, students need to know that effective readers have to often reread a paragraph if it doesn't make sense. Read the paragraph quickly, reread to find important ideas or sentences, and then either continue or go back to reread. So you reread it quickly, and then reread it to find important ideas, and then continue. And here's the 3x5 card again. Now, as you read, your eyes will be going back and forth. Your eyes do not go in a straight sentence. And your eyes are kind of doing little previews. I like to put it on top of the sentence. It keeps my eyes focused, but allows me to kind of preview to see what's the next. Some people put it below the sentence and slowly move it down as you read. But know that this is a very effective strategy for students, and try either putting it on top or below. Read and pause. Read a paragraph. Pause. Do I understand? Return or resume. This is called metacognition, and you have to tell students that all readers do this. You don't always get it the first time. So before an exam, I have my students, my undergrad students, but in high school, you should think about this. In middle school, you type up and you organize the notes and use highlighters to denote the headings in 9-point font, double columns. And it's again that process of organizing what you have read, putting it into groups. Most of my students, when they organize their notes, they discover that they don't actually even need to look at their notes. I always invite my students to use their notes when I give exams. It's the process of finding the main ideas and organizing them that solidifies it in the head. All right, questions can be emailed to me. During the webinar, I actually had people raise their hands.